On the bookshelf, Half a Lifelong Romance, Love in a Fallen City, Little Reunions. Eileen Chang's books have never been absent from bookshelves across the Chinese-speaking world. In 1943 Shanghai, there was another woman whose books outsold hers. Do you know who was even more popular than Eileen Chang? The answer lies hidden in a tiny 100-square-foot room, December 1982, Shanghai. In a 100-square-foot room, a woman lay dying. She made one last wish, to see her book one more time. This book was called 10 Years of Marriage. It had once caused a tremendous uproar in Shanghai. It was reprinted again and again before 1949. The authorized edition was reprinted a full 36 times. The first printing sold out on the same day, then reprinted and sold again, unable to meet demand, 36 times. This number exceeded that of any book by Eileen Chang during the same era. Yet in 1982, when people searched every corner of that small room for her, searched everywhere they could possibly look in the surrounding area, the answer they got was, not a single copy remained. Her books were somewhere else. Her name, too, was about to vanish. This woman was called Su Qing. In 1943, Shanghai, two women rose to fame at the same time, both writing stories about women. One was named Zhang Ailing. The other was named Su Qing. Today, almost everyone remembers Eileen Chang. As for Su Qing, many haven't even heard her name. But back then, Su Qing's books sold more copies than Eileen Chang's. Back then, Zhang Ailing once said this herself: "To be compared with Bing Xin and Bai Wei, I really cannot take that as an honor. Only being mentioned in the same breath as Su Qing that I'm willing to accept." So what exactly did Su Qing write? Why did readers love her, yet history chose to erase her? Why is it that the person who told the truth couldn't even keep her own books in the end? This isn't a story about literary genius, nor is it a story about political persecution. This is a story about the price of telling the truth. Welcome to Fanko Decodes. I'm Fanko. Today, let's explore Su Qing's story together. The story begins in 1934 with a female college student's wedding. In 1914, Su Qing was born into a scholarly family in Ningbo, Zhejiang. Her father, Feng Yusong, was a Boxer Indemnity Scholarship student studying at Columbia University in America. This meant that in the year Su Qing was born, her father was on the other side of the ocean, using money born of humiliation to seize an opportunity that could change their family's destiny. Su Qing grew up at her maternal grandmother's house, watching her mother study at the women's normal school, watching her grandfather serve as a principal in the countryside. What her family had in abundance was books and respect for learning. Her father returned to China in 1919 and took a position at the Bank of China in Hankou. At age 7, Su Qing moved with her parents to Shanghai and enrolled in a neighborhood elementary school. But in 1924, her father's bank collapsed, and he passed away shortly after. Su Qing was 10 years old when her family fell into decline. She followed her mother back to Ningbo and continued her schooling in the countryside. Her grades were excellent, her teachers were fond of her, and she loved calligraphy and writing essays. Sometimes, as she wrote and wrote, she would feel something flowing through the tip of her pen. She didn't know what to call it. She just wanted to write and couldn't stop. In 1933, Su Qing was 19 years old and was admitted to the Foreign Literature Department at National Central University in Nanjing. It was a place where she truly felt free. The university had foreign books, ideas, and debates. Su Qing began writing short pieces that were published in the campus newspaper. An idea grew clearer and clearer in her heart. Perhaps one day she could live by her writing. But that very year, she met a man named Li Qinhao. Then she got pregnant. The logic of that era was simple. If you got pregnant, you dropped out of school and got married. There were no other options. Su Qing put down her textbooks and let go of that dream. In 1934, she followed her husband back to Ningbo, where they held a wedding at his family home that blended old traditions with new customs. The wedding took about less than an hour. However, something happened on the wedding night that Su Qing remembered for a very, very long time. After the wedding ended, the first thing her husband did was repeatedly inspect the bedsheets. Su Qing later wrote down this detail in her book. She said that look in his eyes was a coldness she had never seen before. At that very moment, she began to understand. Marriage had far less to do with love than anyone had ever told her. The days after marriage were longer than she'd imagined, and heavier. Su Qing gave birth to 3 daughters in succession. Her in-laws were displeased. With each daughter born, her mother-in-law grew colder. When the first daughter was born, her mother-in-law refused to enter the delivery room and wouldn't let the child breastfeed so that she could have another baby sooner next year. The pain of childbirth Su Qing endured alone. The cold of postpartum confinement she bore by herself. Later, Su Qing wrote these words: "When it comes to the critical moment, all men act as if nothing's happening, leaving the pain and danger for women to face alone." At that time, no Chinese woman writer had ever written about childbirth like that. Her husband later had an affair. It wasn't a secret, just something no one spoke out loud. Su Qing's response was to start submitting articles to earn money. She found literary magazines, wrote short pieces, and used the payment to help with household expenses. When her husband discovered this, he flew into a rage. He said, "It's not necessarily a bad thing for a woman to study, but she shouldn't be so focused on writing articles to make money, competing with her husband." And that wasn't the end of it. One time, Su Qing went to her husband to ask for household money for groceries. He slapped her across the face. Su Qing later wrote about this scene in her book. She didn't use harsh words, only wrote about the thought that flashed through her mind at that moment. Was something wrong with this man? Or with the entire logic of marriage itself? This small family was just the old-style extended family, repackaged in a cleverly designed shell. Before marriage, her parents' home was the cage. After marriage, the husband's home is the cage. Inside the cage, there's a stove, there are children, and a few dollars the husband tosses in now and then. If the woman in the cage wants to fly away, she can't. In 1942, Su Qing got divorced. She left with nothing. Her ex-husband gave her almost nothing. Su Qing raised her children alone, surviving by writing. Sometimes, when she was severely ill, she still dragged herself up to write, because if she didn't write, there'd be no money, and without money, the children would go hungry. She needed the money. She also needed an outlet. She needed to speak out everything that had been bottled up inside her for 10 years. In the spring of 1943, she began serializing a novel in Shanghai's Feng Yutan magazine. The title was 10 Years of Marriage. It tells the story of a woman named Su Huaiqing, how she got married, had children, became trapped, struggled, and eventually divorced. Su Huaiqing was Su Qing herself. What did this book write about that made readers feel too real, a bit uncomfortable? It broke 7 taboos, each one forbidden to touch in that era. The first, the truth about childbirth. Su Qing wrote about giving birth. Not poetic childbirth, not the maternal sublimation of pain and joy intertwined, but real, excruciating agony, followed immediately by the cold indifference of her family. She wrote, "What good is marriage anyway? Once you've experienced that kind of pain in your belly, you'll want nothing to do with men for the rest of your life." When this line was published, many female readers fell silent for a long time after reading it. They never imagined anyone would dare to write such a thing. The second blow, the weight of a daughter. Su Qing doesn't use the phrase favoring sons over daughters. She only writes the details. After giving birth to a daughter, her mother-in-law wouldn't enter the room. Her father-in-law was cold and indifferent, and her husband remained silent. When the new life arrived, the family's reaction was less enthusiastic than welcoming a newly purchased pig. Details carry more power than any words ever could. The third taboo, female sexuality and desire. This is the most shocking and scandalous part of the entire book. Su Qing wrote about women's desires not as something shameful or sinful, but as a legitimate, active need. She wrote in first person, directly stating, "I need a young, handsome, affectionate man to nestle beside me every night, sleeping side by side, without needing many words, where our hearts are in perfect harmony, soul to soul, body to body, forever united, embraced as one." In China, in 1943, no woman had ever written about herself like this. In that era, when women wrote about emotions, they either elevated them into a philosophy of love or transformed them into revolutionary fervor. Su Qing said, "No. This is simply how I think." In another essay, she even rewrote the classic sentence from the Book of Rights: "Food, drink, and men are the great desires of women," bringing men into women's great desires. These 7 characters completely inverted the Confucian gender order. The fourth, the essence of housework. Su Qing wrote about daily necessities, about the kitchen, about cleaning, about the day-to-day grind of managing a household. But she doesn't portray these as virtuous wifely duties. Instead, she depicts them as an unpaid lifetime contract. Housekeeping is a profession, but ordinary professions can be terminated. And if a husband changes his heart midway, what then? This question, in 1943, no one could answer. The fifth question, honesty about money. Su Qing was one of the very few female writers of that era who dared to openly talk about money. She said she wrote to make money. She said the most tangible things in marriage were money and children, not love. In this utterly unreliable modern society, money and children are still the most solid things. This remark made some readers frown. How could this woman be so unromantic? Su Qing didn't care. She had witnessed firsthand, when a husband won't give you a single penny, how long can love really last? The sixth blow, the truth of the wedding night. Su Qing wrote about that bedsheet detail, those examining eyes, that unfamiliar coldness. She used this scene to illustrate, you're not a person, you're an object. From the very first night entering this relationship, you had already been examined as an object. Rule number 7, the most unforgivable compassion. There's a line in the book that made many people uncomfortable. A woman who supports her children through prostitution. In my view, she is nothing short of the greatest. Su Qing wasn't defending anything. She was revealing a reality. When society offers women no economic options, what truly constitutes the greatness of maternal love? This question, no one wanted to answer it in that era. In July 1944, 10 Years of Marriage was published as a standalone book. The first printing sold out on release day, and every subsequent printing sold out immediately, with demand far exceeding supply. Within 6 months, it was reprinted 9 times. By 1949, the authorized edition had been reprinted 36 times. The publisher discovered a phenomenon. The most enthusiastic readers weren't the literary elite, but ordinary urban women. They passed this book around to each other, finishing it but not returning it, because they saw themselves in its pages. They said, "It's too real, almost painful, but we can't stop reading." That very autumn, when 10 Years of Marriage was being serialized, Su Qing received a letter. It was from Zhang Ailing. In the letter, There were 4 characters that Qing later said made her laugh and soften her heart when she saw them imposing upon our shared gender. And so, 2 strangers became acquainted. Fall of 1943, Shanghai. This was a strange year. The Japanese military had occupied the city for 2 years already. Japanese soldiers patrolled the streets, newspapers were censored, and informants lurked in cafes. Politically, there was nothing one could say. So people turned elsewhere, toward the human heart, toward everyday life, toward those things that political oppression didn't much care about, things that were real enough that people couldn't avoid them, things like love, like marriage, like how a woman finds her place in this world. That very year, 2 women emerged on Shanghai's literary scene. One was named Eileen Chang, the other, Qing. They represented 2 completely different voices. Zhang Ailing's writing was like a carving knife, precise, restrained, etching out the darkest patterns in human nature. She wrote red rose, white rose, wrapping the sharpest blade in gorgeous imagery. Reading her work is a beautiful kind of pain you're pierced through, yet you can't bear to look away. Qing was different. Qing is a basin of scalding water thrown right in your face. She doesn't use imagery, doesn't use metaphors, she just says it straight. I need a young, handsome, passionate man. In today's unreliable society, only money and children are truly dependable. Zhang Ailing wrote about women's predicaments, while Qing spoke out women's desires. Eileen Chang's readers were people in literary circles. Qing's readers were every woman on the street. But in 1943, they weren't rivals. They were friends. Their acquaintance began with that solicitation letter. After 10 years of marriage started its serialization, Qing decided to launch her own magazine. In October 1943, the monthly magazine Heaven and Earth was launched in Shanghai. Qing took on all 3 roles, herself publisher, editor-in-chief, and distributor, setting up the office in a small room on Rue Adoir. She needed good articles, and Zhang Ailing came to mind. Qing wrote a letter inviting her to contribute, and in it were 4 words: as a fellow woman. End. Zhang Ailing later recalled that when she received this letter, she laughed and her heart softened, and immediately sent over her short story, The Blockade. And so, 2 of the most perceptive women began a sincere friendship. This acquaintance had a little-known sequel. Shortly after, a man saw Zhang Ailing's article published in Heaven and Earth and was absolutely astounded by her talent. He tracked down Qing, and only after repeated pleading did she hesitantly give him the address. This man's name was Lancheng. That legendary romance, that would later shake the literary world its beginning, lay in Qing's magazine, Heaven and Earth. In that submission letter Qing wrote to Eileen Chang. History sometimes works this way, hidden in an ordinary letter. Heaven and Earth quickly became one of the most important literary magazines in Shanghai at that time. In the inaugural editorial, Qing wrote, "The world is so vast, there's nothing we can't talk about, as long as what you say is interesting." She had only one criterion. It had to be interesting. No politics, no positions. As long as it was well written, as long as it was authentic, it got published. Zhang Ailing published a large number of important works here. Heaven and Earth released about 20 issues in total, becoming a rare breath of literary air in Shanghai during the Japanese occupation. In 1944, a symposium was held in Shanghai with the theme Literature by Women Writers. Zhang Ailing, Qing, Pan Lu Dai, Guan Lu, and others all attended, and afterwards a written piece was left behind called Women Writers in Conversation. Back then, Su and Zhang were spoken of together as the 2 most prominent names in Shanghai's literary circles. Zhang Ailing even wrote an entire essay specifically about her. titled My View of Su Qing. The very first sentence was that famous line, "To be compared with Bing Xin and Bai Wei, I really cannot take that as an honor. Only when compared alongside Su Qing am I willing and content." Zhang Ailing went on to write, "When it comes to truly grasping the essence of life's pleasures, Su Qing is second to none. Her defining quality is a magnificent simplicity. Through her clean and elegant method of expression, the most ordinary words become the most moving, because she understands the commonality of human nature better than anyone else." There's another quote that many people have forgotten today. To underestimate the value of Su Qing's writing is to underestimate the cultural level of the present era. This statement was directed at those who look down on Su Qing. The meaning was, you mock her, but you're the ones who don't understand literature. Su Qing returned the favor by commenting on Eileen Chang. She said, "I never really read works by female writers, except for Eileen Chang's writing." This remark was made right in front of numerous female writers, causing a stunned silence. Su Qing didn't care. She always spoke this way direct, regardless of the occasion. Their styles, just like their ways of speaking, were completely different, yet they appreciated each other. Literary critic Tan Zhengbi made an assessment at the time that's still quoted today. In terms of consciousness, Su Qing surpasses Zhang Ailing. When it comes to technique, Zhang Ailing has the edge. This assessment deserves a pause. The one with more advanced and radical consciousness was Su Qing. The one with more refined artistic polish and more perfect form was Zhang Ailing. Today, who do people remember? The one with better technique, not the one with more progressive consciousness. If you want to see just how much more straightforward Su Qing was compared to Eileen Chang, there's one example that illustrates it best. In 10 Years of Marriage Continued, the female protagonist, Su Huaiqing, has a new lover. This man has a certain deficiency. How did Su Qing write about it? Su Huaiqing looked straight at this man and spoke bluntly, "I'm not satisfied. Among all the men I've known, you're practically the most useless. Get out. I suggest you go back and get yourself some vitamin shots before you come looking for women again." 1945. A female character speaking such words to her male partner, such a scene never appeared in Eileen Chang's writing. Her female characters, no matter how much pain they endure, bear it through metaphor and silence. Su Qing's female characters speak out directly, say it straight, giving the other party no fig leaf to hide behind. Which is more courageous? Which pays the greater price? These are two different questions with two different answers. In 1944, Su Qing's sales surpassed Zhang Ailing's. This isn't a literary evaluation made after the fact, but the black and white records of the publishing world at that time. 10 Years of Marriage had already been reprinted more than 10 times that year. Meanwhile, romances and Written on Water combined didn't even come close to those numbers. By 1949, Su Qing's 36 reprints represented a number that no contemporary female writer could match. Ordinary urban women were reading Su Qing. They hid the books in kitchen corners, tucked them beside their pillows after the children fell asleep. They saw themselves in those pages, and they saw a possibility. Someone dared to speak the words they had always suppressed, the words they didn't dare say. This woman named Su Qing put into words what they couldn't, but in the summer of 1945, everything began to change. That August, Japan announced its defeat and surrender. On the streets of Shanghai, drums and gongs thundered. People rushed to spread the word. The war of resistance had been won. Su Qing stood in that crowd. What she didn't know was that on the other side of all this cheering, someone was drafting a list, and on that list was her name. November 1945. Shanghai, a pamphlet was published, titled A Criminal History of Cultural Traitors. It was a list containing the names of 17 people. They were labeled as cultural traitors, people who had written, published, and released works during the Japanese occupation of Shanghai under the jurisdiction of the Wang Jingwei puppet regime. On the list, there was a name, Eileen Chang, and another name, Su Qing. This was the first time Su Qing had seen her name written on a document like this. To understand this list, we need to go back to 1943. That year, Su Qing decided to launch Tiandi magazine and desperately needed startup capital. She found someone willing to put up the money, Chen Gongbo. Who was Chen Gongbo? He was the mayor of Shanghai under the Wang Jingwei regime, the man who would later be sentenced to death by the nationalist government for treason. Chen Gongbo gave Su Qing a check for 100,000 yuan, and Yang Shuhui, the wife of Zhou Fohai, also provided financial support. Su Qing took the money and founded the magazine. At the same time, the Wang Jingwei puppet government invited Su Qing to serve as a commissioner in the Shanghai municipal government. Su Qing took the position, worked for a few months, felt she couldn't adapt to the bureaucratic system, and resigned. After resigning, Chen Gongbo continued to pay her a salary. These three things piled up together: the source of funding, her official position, and their public and private interactions. After the victory in the War of Resistance, these three things became evidence against her. Su Qing naturally tried to defend herself. She said she had never written any political propaganda for the Japanese or Wang Jingwei. The content of Heaven and Earth was entirely about literature and women's lives, never publishing any political positions. Her relationship with Chen Gongbo was a divorced woman's survival choice in chaotic times, not a political allegiance. The nationalist government, in fact, found no substantial evidence against her either. She was briefly questioned, then released. The charge of traitor never stuck. But the list had already been printed. The Wenhui Daily labeled her works and Eileen Chang's works as pornographic literature. People cursed at her on the street, and people gossiped about her in the newspapers. Literary prostitute, sex peddler, fallen woman writer. These labels were slapped on her, one after another. She discovered that a person's reputation could be destroyed without any court ruling. At this moment, Su Qing did something. Someone suggested she change her name, adopt a new identity, and start over. Su Qing refused. She said, "Why should I change my name? Changing it would mean I actually did something wrong. I refuse to change it." Morally, this was a matter of backbone. Politically, this came at a cost. Her refusal to confess, her refusal to change her name, her refusal to cooperate in the logic of that era. This was equivalent to showing no remorse. And the system had a complete set of methods for dealing with those who showed no remorse. It was only a matter of time. Meanwhile, another name on the list made a completely different choice. In July 1952, Eileen Chang, wearing a simple floral cotton kipao and carrying modest luggage, crossed the Lowu Bridge and left for Hong Kong. She was 32 years old. Before leaving, she made a pact with her aunt. From now on, no contact whatsoever, no phone calls, no letters. A writer's self-imposed exile. Eileen Chang went to Hong Kong and later went to America. In Hong Kong, she translated The Old Man and the Sea for the United States Information Service, where she met the Soong couple who would have a profound influence on her life. She wrote The Rice Sprout Song and Naked Earth, and began to spread continuously throughout the overseas Chinese community. In 1961, Chinese-American scholar C.T. Xia published a book, A History of Modern Chinese Fiction. This book changed Eileen Chang's fate from that point forward. Xia Jiqing dedicated a full 42 pages to a focused discussion of Eileen Chang. 42 pages. You have to understand. When he wrote about Lu Xun, he only used 26 pages. He called The Golden Kanga the greatest novella in China since ancient times, and hailed Zhang Ailing as the best and most important writer in China today. This book became a standard textbook for Chinese modern literature courses in European and American universities, sparking a Zhang Ailing craze that continues to this day. In Xia Qing's book, there was no dedicated chapter for Su Qing. Su Qing, not a single word. Two women, both rose to fame in 1943, both made it onto the 1,945 list. One left had overseas ferrymen continuously spreading her work, and ultimately entered the Hall of Literary Classics. One stayed behind, with no one on the other side of that sea to speak for her. Literary history, sometimes, is not a ledger of talent, but a ledger of fate. After 1949, Su Qing's works completely vanished from mainland China's publishing market. Not a gradual disappearance, but gone in an instant. All her works published before 1949 were completely banned. 10 years of marriage had gone through 36 editions, and every single copy became something that couldn't circulate anymore. Su Qing had no income, no publishing channels, and no place in the literary circles. She started learning Russian, attended government-organized study sessions, joined an opera troupe as a scriptwriter, changed her name to Feng Yunzhuang, and wrote plays that aligned with the political climate. She thought that would be enough. She thought that as long as she cooperated enough, worked hard enough, someday the events of those years could be turned over to a new page. She didn't know that turning the page on the past in certain eras wasn't something you could achieve just by trying hard enough. Little did she know that in 1955, a letter was waiting in someone's home, waiting to be discovered. In the fall of 1949, the People's Republic of China was founded. Shanghai had a new sky overhead. Su Qing stood at this new beginning and decided to start over. She paid out of her own pocket to enroll in Russian classes in that era. Russian was the language of the future. She attended a government-organized training course for drama and opera script writing and directing, and after completing it, joined the Yu Opera Troupe as a scriptwriter. She stopped using the name Su Qing and returned to her birth name, Feng Yunzhuang. She wrote Lei Feng. She wrote Wang Jie. She wrote every play that aligned with the current political climate. She believed that by changing her name and switching direction, time would gradually wash away the events of those years. Time wouldn't hold grudges. But time doesn't always work that way. In 1951, something happened that Su Qing never spoke much about publicly. Her ex-husband, Li Qinho, was executed by firing squad for embezzlement. They had been divorced for nearly 10 years, but the children were still with him. After Li Qinho's death, Su Qing brought the children back and continued raising them on her own. This is a quiet detail in Su Qing's fate. No screaming to the heavens, no accusations against the world, just a woman bringing her children home and carrying on. What did she rely on to raise them? She relied on her salary from the theater troupe, on the occasional published writings, on the sheer stubborn determination to squeeze through each day, one after another. In 1950, Su Qing did something that seemed perfectly fine at the time. She submitted 32 essays to the Hong Kong-based Shanghai Daily, writing about her observations of the new society, things like Yangge dances and new customs. She waited for the payment. Not a penny came. What came instead was a summons from the Shanghai Public Security Bureau. The reason was, these articles were deemed to contain elements of satirizing the new society. Su Qing couldn't figure out where the satire was, but she wisely stopped. She continued writing plays under the name Feng Yunchuang at the theater troupe, living quietly. In 1954, Su Qing began working on a historical drama, Sima Qian. Sima Qian, the author of Records of the Grand Historian, that court historian who suffered castration for speaking his mind. Perhaps when Su Qing chose this subject matter, she didn't realize what the choice itself implied. During the creative process, she encountered some historical questions that she wasn't sure about. So she did something completely normal. She wrote a letter to Professor Jia Zhifang at Fudan University, seeking advice on an academic question. A letter asking about history. In 1955, the Hu Feng incident erupted. Hu Feng, a renowned literary critic, was labeled the ringleader of a counter-revolutionary clique for holding different views on the direction of literature and art. The entire movement rapidly expanded, and anyone who had any dealings with Hu Feng could potentially be implicated. Jia Zhifang was labeled a Hu Feng element. Public security personnel searched Jia Zhifang's home and found various correspondence among his letters. One of them was written by Su Qing, December 1st, 1955. Su Qing was arrested and imprisoned in Shanghai's Tilanqiao prison. The charge, counter-revolutionary. She had never participated in any political movement. She knew absolutely nothing about who Hu Feng was or what he stood for. She had simply asked a professor a historical question while writing a historical drama. A single letter inquiring about history cost her 1 year and 7 months in prison. On the 27th of June, 1957, Su Qing was released. The reason for her release was written into the official document, just a few words. The crime was not serious. The offense is not serious. This qualifier is the most absurd essence of the entire affair. What it means is, you committed a crime, but the crime isn't major, so you're released. As for what crime you actually committed, this document doesn't make clear. As for the so-called connection between you and Hu Feng, this document offers even less explanation. Su Qing walked out of Tilanqiao prison and stood on the streets of Shanghai. The world was no different from what it had been a year and 7 months ago, except that she had aged a bit. Years later, looking back at every blow Su Qing suffered in her life, a certain logic began to emerge clearly. She said marriage was a cage. People called her a literary prostitute. She said women have desires was called a sex peddler. She accepted funding from a Wang puppet regime official, was put on the traitor list. She refused to change her name, was seen as unrepentant. She submitted articles to Hong Kong newspapers, was interrogated and accused of satirizing the new society. She wrote a letter to a professor asking about history. She was detained for 1 year and 7 months. Every time she spoke the truth, every time she said, "This is what I believe," it became the excuse for the next attack. This isn't karma, isn't fate playing tricks. This is a system's standard operating procedure for dealing with an uncooperative person. Find the opportunity, find the opening. No matter how absurd that opening might be, could all be used. A letter asking about history in exchange for 1 year and 7 months in prison. Is it reasonable? Not reasonable. But it happened. The year Su Qing walked out of prison, she was already 43 years old. There was no longer a place for her in literary circles. The scriptwriter position at the UA Opera Troupe had also been filled by someone else. When she returned, she could only work as a doorkeeper at the theater. After her release from prison, Su Qing found a job at the Huangpu District Cultural Center. The title was playwright, but what she actually did varied from time to time. Sometimes she'd write scripts, sometimes handle subtitles, sometimes play supporting roles, and sometimes do nothing at all, just sit there. At the end of each month, there was a fixed income. She didn't ask how much, as long as it was enough to stay alive. She had written plays that aligned with the political climate of the times. Those plays had her name listed in the playwright credits, but no one remembered them. This was Su Qing after 1957, a woman whose works were completely banned, who had been imprisoned, and who now waited at the cultural center for assignment. 1966. The Cultural Revolution began. The ransackers came. Her house was turned upside down. What was there to confiscate? She had almost nothing. But having nothing wasn't a reason to be spared. The house raids were a ritual, a way of marking you as the kind of person who needed to be scrutinized. Then came the struggle sessions. She was forced to wear a placard and stand at her own doorstep, subjected to the pointing fingers and whispers of her neighbors. What was written on that placard she never mentioned later. Probably traitor writer, or historical counter-revolutionary, or perhaps both. Then came the cowshed, followed by being sent to the countryside for labor reform. Her tuberculosis began to flare up during this period. She'd always had it, even from her younger years, but she'd kept it suppressed, never properly treated it. Now, her body was coming to collect its debt. There was one thing Su Qing rarely ever spoke about, and that was her daughters. She had several children. During the Cultural Revolution, her eldest and second daughters chose to draw a clear line with her and cut off all contact. This wasn't their fault, it was the logic of that era. Maintaining ties with a historical counter-revolutionary would bring trouble upon themselves. Self-preservation was a necessity and a choice. But for a woman who had already lost everything, her daughter's departure was a different kind of sharpness, deeper than the struggle sessions, longer lasting than the cowshed. In 1975, Su Qing retired. The Huangpu District Cultural Center gave her a retirement pension. She received 43 yuan, 1 jiao, and 9 fen per month. 43.19 yuan. This number, precise down to the cent, reads like an invoice or perhaps like a verdict. A female writer who had once published 36 editions of her books, who had sold better than Eileen Chang during Shanghai's most prosperous era, had a retirement pension of 43 yuan, 1 jiao, and 9 fen. Was it enough to live on? Barely. Just enough. After retirement, Su Qing lived in a small room in downtown Shanghai, sharing a kitchen and bathroom with neighbors. The neighbors bullied her, and she had no strength to fight back. Later, she exchanged her place with a family in the suburbs, just hoping for some peace and quiet. The new place was 10 square meters. There, she cut herself off almost entirely from the outside world. She lay in bed all day, unable to eat. Occasionally, she would write to old friends, her handwriting growing weaker and weaker. In her final letter, she wrote, "I lie in bed all day, unable to eat anything. My illness brings such suffering. I only wish for an early death, and when I die, notify no one." On December 7th, 1982, Su Qing died in that 10 square meter room from complications of heart disease, diabetes, and tuberculosis. Before her final moments, she vomited blood several times. She was 69 years old. At the moment of death, she expressed one last wish. She wanted to see 10 years of marriage one more time. There wasn't a single copy at home. Her books had once been printed in 36 editions, had once spread throughout the streets and alleys of Shanghai, had once been secretly read at bedside by countless ordinary women of the city. But in 1982, all 36 editions of those books had scattered somewhere into history. In her house, there was nothing, not a single copy. 2 years later, on November 9th, 1984, the Shanghai Public Security Bureau issued a review decision. The arrest of Feng Heiyi on December 1st, 1955, as a counter-revolutionary case was erroneous and is hereby corrected, and restore her reputation. The vindication decree came 2 full years later than the person. She didn't live to see that day. The rehabilitation decree was delivered to an empty house. Su Qing was already gone. 2 years earlier, in that 10-square-meter room, she left this world with the regret of never finding her own books. Now, the document arrived, stating that arrest was a mistake. Reputation restored. Reputation, can it be returned to someone who's already gone? Perhaps it can. What was returned was her name, not the 37 years she had lost. Time moved on. In the 1980s, after reform and opening up, a Zhang Ailing craze began sweeping across mainland China. Zhang Ailing's books were republished, rediscussed, and re-entered the canon of literary classics. In this wave of enthusiasm, people began noticing a name that was always mentioned together with Zhang Ailing Su Qing. People started asking, who is Su Qing? Who exactly was this person that Zhang Ailing said she was only willing to be compared with? Writer Wang Anyi wrote an article titled In Search of Su Qing. She wrote in it, if we could see Su Qing clearly, we would probably understand Shanghai's female urbanites. To understand Su Qing's writing, this boldness is what's credible. This is an important judgment. Wang Anyi isn't defending Su Qing. She's saying Su Qing is the key to understanding Shanghai women. Not Zhang Ailing, but Su Qing. In 2009, 10 Years of Marriage was republished by China Women's Publishing House. Over 60 years later, this book reappeared in bookstores, on online platforms, and on Duban's reading lists. Readers left all kinds of reviews. One comment, quoted by many people, I never imagined that people from the 1940s would have such similar views to people today. It seems that throughout history, no matter how the environment or 70 years, Su Qing's words haven't aged a day. Let's place what Su Qing said side by side with today's conversations and take a look. In 1943, Su Qing wrote, housekeeping is a profession, but ordinary professions can be resigned from, whereas this profession of being a woman is lifelong. So what should be done if a husband changes his heart midway? Today, this question is called How to Compensate Homemakers for Their Labor. It's debated in courtrooms, discussed in academic circles, and an enduring debate topic on social media. Su Qing wrote in 1944, what good is marriage anyway? Once you've experienced that stomach pain just once, you'll never want to deal with men again for the rest of your life. Today, this voice is called no marriage, no children, called the unequal distribution of reproductive costs, called the systematic questioning of the marriage and childbearing system by the younger generation. Su Qing wrote in On Divorce, an 18 or 19-year-old Nora who runs away might feel the world is full of sympathy and help. A Nora in her late 20s will feel lonely and isolated, and an old Nora in her 30s or 40s will inevitably suffer ridicule and abuse from people. Today, this statement is called the social predicament of women in their 30s, the common backdrop of countless personal experiences. Su Qing wasn't prophesying the future. She was simply describing her own bleeding life, and those lives 80 years later still haven't ended. In every era, there are women who speak the words others silence. Bing Xin spoke of love and beauty, and was remembered by those who came after. Ding Ling spoke of revolution and was recorded in literary history. Eileen Chang spoke of desolation and was polished by time into a classic. Su Qing spoke of the most concrete things: the ledger of marriage, the cost of childbearing, the legitimacy of desire, the necessity of money. The things she said weren't beautiful, weren't uplifting, weren't easy to digest, but they were true. They are the truths earned by a living, breathing woman through 10 years of marriage, 3 childbirths, and a divorce settlement where she walked away with nothing. These truths cost her 37 years. Let's return one final time to that 10 square meter room. In 1982, that woman's dying wish was to see 10 years of marriage one more time. At home, there wasn't a single copy. Her book had once been printed in 36 editions, yet, at the end of her life, not a single copy could be found. This was no accident. It was the ultimate result of those 37 years. A person who told the truth, erased from the shelves by the very system her truths described. Erased from circulation, almost erased from memory, almost, but not entirely. End quote. Qing paid the full price for speaking the truth, with 36 editions of her book, 1 year and 7 months in prison, a monthly salary of 43 yuan, 1 jiao, and 9 fen, plus that 10 square meter room, paid off the full price for speaking the truth. She didn't complain, she didn't regret, she didn't change her name, she didn't confess guilt. She simply wrote, and then endured the consequences. Today, the name Qing is being heard again only because someone is talking about it. Those women who kept her books hidden under their pillows, those women who, after reading, said, "Too real, a bit hard to take," and quietly passed them on to the people around them what their names were. Nobody knows their names. What they said or didn't say, nobody knows either. The person who outsold Eileen Chang disappeared for 37 years and has now been found. Those who disappeared and were never found again, speaking the truth comes at a price. Not speaking the truth also comes at a price. It's just that the price has no numbers, no invoices, no paperwork. Quiet and silent. Qing's disappearance left traces to follow, and those words we keep hidden in our hearts, those concerns we don't voice out loud. What kind of disappearance do you want them to become? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching today's extended episode. I'm Fanko. See you next time.